My name is Serafina Vale, and I believe that the quietest moments often carry the most profound lessons. I was 28 when my grandmother Eleanora passed away, leaving behind a silence in my life that I thought would never be filled. A year later, as I stood on the cusp of marrying Julian Thorne, the love of my life, I was also unknowingly standing on the precipice of a personal storm, one that would test everything I thought I knew about love, family, and the quiet strength Eleanora had always nurtured in me. The whispers of her wisdom and the tangible legacy she entrusted to me became my compass. Eleanora was a woman woven from sunlight and stories. She had been a librarian in our coastal town of Port Blossom, her hands always smelling faintly of old paper and Earl Grey tea. She moved through the world with a gentle grace, yet beneath it lay a bedrock of resilience. A woman must have her own garden, Serafina, she'd often tell me, not just referring to the riot of roses and herbs that flourished under her care behind her cozy garden apartment, but to a space of her own making, a source of inner sustenance and independence. After my grandfather passed when I was just a child, Eleanora, with a modest pension and an unshakable belief in self-reliance, began to quietly invest. She studied local history, understood the ebb and flow of Port Blossom's fortunes, and with careful foresight acquired properties, not as a mogul, but as a gardener tending to her seeds. I knew she was comfortable, but the true extent of her quiet efforts remained her secret, shared only when she was gone. The months of her final illness were a bittersweet tapestry of shared memories and quiet care. I moved into her sun-filled spare room, the scent of lavender and old books a constant comfort. It was during those twilight evenings, watching the sailboats glide across Azure Bay from her small balcony, that she'd impart fragments of her philosophy. "Life will ask much of you, little star," she'd said one evening, her voice thin as parchment, but her eyes bright. "Be sure you have your own well to draw from." I thought she meant emotional fortitude, the resilience she herself embodied. I had no idea she also meant something so concrete. Her passing left an Eleanora-shaped void in my universe. Grief was a heavy cloak, muffling the world. It was weeks later, in the hushed office of Mr. Silas Croft, her solicitor for many years, that the full measure of her foresight was revealed. "To my granddaughter, Serafina Vale," Mr. Croft read, his voice kind, "I bequeath my entire property portfolio." He slid a slim file across the polished mahogany. My hands trembled as I opened it. Deeds. 3 of them. The garden apartment I now called home, a charming heritage loft in Port Blossom's historic old town, and a hillside villa with breathtaking views of the Pacific. All unencumbered, all meticulously maintained. "Your grandmother," Mr. Croft said with a soft smile, "was a remarkably astute woman. She wished for you to have a foundation of security, a garden of your own, as she often put it." The initial days were a whirlwind of legalities, conversations with property managers, and a dawning understanding of my new reality. The loft and the villa were tenanted, generating a steady income of around $5,000 a month, more than enough to cover taxes, upkeep, and still leave a significant remainder. The garden apartment, Eleanora's sanctuary, became mine. I decided then, instinctively, to keep this inheritance quiet. Earlier relationships had taught me that money, even modest amounts, could shift dynamics, invite assumptions, or worse, exploitation. A former partner had once borrowed from my savings for a sure-thing investment that vanished along with him. Eleanora's voice echoed, "Guard your garden, Serafina. Not everyone who admires its flowers wishes it well." 6 months after Eleanora's passing, I met Julian Thorne. I was still navigating the currents of grief and my changed circumstances. Julian was a breath of fresh air, kind, intelligent, with a warm laugh that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He worked in his family's business, Thorne and Sons Artisanal Foods, a well-respected local company. He knew I lived in my grandmother's apartment, the one she'd left me, but I didn't elaborate on the portfolio. It wasn't deceit, more a tender shoot of caution I wasn't ready to expose. Our connection was immediate, a shared love for art. I was a curator at Port Blossom's small but vibrant gallery, rambling coastal walks and fiercely contested games of Scrabble. Our romance unfolded like a beautiful, fast-blooming flower. Within 6 months, we were talking of a future. Within 9, he proposed on a windswept bluff overlooking the ocean, the diamond in the ring a Thorne family heirloom, reset in a simple, elegant band that suited my taste perfectly. That night, champagne bubbles danced in our glasses in my little garden apartment. The words, "Julian, there's more to Eleanora's legacy than just this place," were on the tip of my tongue. But a familiar whisper of caution, soft as a sea breeze, held me back. "Not yet," it seemed to say. "Wait until the roots are deeper." Julian's family, the Thornes, were what one might call comfortably established in Port Blossom. His father, Victor, was the hardworking patriarch of Thorne and Sons. His mother, Isabel, hailed from a lineage of shipping magnates and carried herself with an air of understated, yet undeniable, authority. She was a patron of the local art scene, a role she seemed to view as both a duty and a stage. I first met them formally at their elegant countryside estate, a sprawling house surrounded by ancient oaks and impeccably manicured gardens. Isabel greeted me with a cool, assessing gaze that lingered on my dress, my sensible shoes, my lack of significant jewelry. "Serafina," she'd said, her voice smooth as silk, "Julian tells us you work at the gallery." "How dedicated of you." The implication that it was a charming hobby rather than a serious career was unmistakable. Throughout that first dinner, Isabel's questions, though politely phrased, felt like delicate probes into my background, my family, my financial standing. "Your grandmother's apartment is in a lovely, quiet part of town, isn't it?" she mused. "So fortunate she had that to leave you." I offered honest, but general answers, a growing unease settling in my stomach. I was glad for my silence. The wedding planning became a gentle tug-of-war. I envisioned a simple ceremony in a botanical garden, intimate and personal. Isabel spoke of Thorne tradition, the grand Arboretum Chapel, a reception at the exclusive Azure Bay Yacht Club. "Naturally, Victor and I will handle the significant expenses," she'd offered, a statement that felt less like generosity and more like a means of ensuring control. I conceded on the chapel but held firm on a smaller, less opulent reception venue, a charming historic in that Julian and I both loved. I felt the familiar weight of not wanting to reveal my own financial capacity, lest it invite further scrutiny or, worse, assumptions. Our wedding day was beautiful, sun-dappled and full of love, though Isabel's subtle air of martyrdom whenever her preferences hadn't prevailed was a faint, discordant note. As Julian slipped the ring on my finger, his eyes full of adoration, none of it mattered. We had decided to keep our finances largely separate, contributing to a joint account for household expenses. Julian, to my relief, found this perfectly normal. "Mother has always had her own inheritance, and Dad his business," he explained. "It's always worked for them." I wondered, briefly, how separate Isabel's finances truly were, or if her influence subtly directed Victor's. The first few months of marriage were idyllic. We honeymooned by the Italian lakes, returning to feather our nest in Eleanora's garden apartment. Julian had sold his bachelor pad, and we used some of those funds to update the kitchen and create a shared studio space for my art research and his product development sketches. It was during a discussion with our contractor that the first, almost imperceptible, tremor of unease surfaced. "Once we have a little more capital," Julian said thoughtfully, tracing a line on the blueprints, "we could open up this whole area. And down the line, we'll need something bigger for a family, of course. Perhaps look at properties in the Thorne family's preferred developments." He said it casually, but the easy assumption about capital and family-approved locations made Eleanora's quiet warnings resonate anew. It wasn't that Julian was greedy, he was ambitious and caring. But there was an undercurrent, a reflection of his upbringing, that valued expansion and familial conformity in a way that felt alien to my own carefully guarded independence. I continued to manage my other two properties discreetly. The tenants in the Old Town loft needed a minor plumbing repair. The Hillside Villa's rental income flowed steadily into my separate account, meticulously managed by Mr. Croft. The anxiety over my secret was a low hum beneath the surface of my happiness. Was I eroding trust, or simply practicing prudence? Eleanora's voice, a constant companion in my thoughts, always seemed to affirm the latter. Isabel Thorne, true to form, established a pattern of weekly Sunday visits almost immediately. She'd arrive, impeccably dressed, bearing gifts that often felt like critiques. An antique silver serving spoon. Your everyday cutlery is rather plain, dear, don't you think? A modern art print. Just a little something to liven up these walls. Your current art is so traditional. Each visit involved a gentle but persistent interrogation about our finances, my career. Are you sure the gallery offers long-term security, Serafina, and our plans for children? The Thorne grandchildren are always so eagerly anticipated. Julian, bless his heart, seemed largely oblivious to the undercurrents. That's just mother, he'd say with an affectionate eye roll. She fussed over Camilla the same way when she married Daniel. He'd once mentioned, in passing, that Isabel's family money had been instrumental in an early expansion of Thorne and Sons, a fact she subtly wielded. She's very protective of the family legacy, he'd added. This only strengthened my resolve. Isabel, it seemed, viewed marriage as a potential merger, and I had no desire for my modest garden to be absorbed into the Thorne estate. Her inquiries grew more specific. That charming little street your grandmother lived on, she'd remark, property values there have held up surprisingly well. Did she have any other little investments, perhaps? A few shares here and there? Eleanora was mostly interested in books and her roses, I'd reply, keeping my tone light. Her investments were in happiness, I think. Isabel would nod, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. Of course. But tangible legacies are so important, don't you find? For continuity. The polite facade cracked slightly during a family dinner at the Thorne estate. Victor was discussing a potential new supplier for a rare spice, and the conversation turned to agricultural land values. Drawing on what I'd learned managing Eleanora's small portfolio and my general interest in local economics, I made a comment about recent trends in coastal farming. Isabel paused, her wine glass halfway to her lips. You seem to have quite a grasp of these things, Serafina, for a gallery curator. I felt a flush creep up my neck. Oh, I just read a bit. And managing Eleanora's apartment involves being on the Residents Association, so I hear things. Residents Association? Isabel echoed, a new sharpness in her tone. I thought it was a small, stand-alone building. My heart sank. The garden apartment was part of a small, self-managed strata of 4 units. Yes, well, technically a strata, a kind of condominium. Just habit to call it an apartment building. Ah, a condominium, Isabel murmured, filing the information away. Those can be quite an asset in the right location. I quickly steered the conversation elsewhere, but an invisible line had been crossed. In the following weeks, Isabel's questions became more pointed. She'd casually mention mutual acquaintances who owned property near my Old Town loft, or comment on the stunning views from the hillside where my villa was located, as if she'd driven by, though she never said so directly. Then, one afternoon, while Julian was at a trade show, I was sketching in our studio when I heard Isabel's voice from the living room. I'd thought she was using the powder room. She was on her phone, her tone clipped and businesslike, utterly unlike her usual social cadence. Yes, I need a comprehensive report on Eleanora Vale's estate. All property holdings, any trusts, probate filings. My sources indicate there may be more than initially disclosed. Urgency is paramount. Family interests are at stake. I froze, the charcoal stick snapping in my fingers. She was investigating me. Investigating Eleanora. When I later, heart-pounding, relayed this to Julian, he seemed more bewildered than alarmed. Mother can be a bit overzealous, he conceded. She probably just wants to ensure everything was handled correctly for you. She means well. Means well, Julian? By secretly investigating my deceased grandmother's private affairs. My voice trembled with a mixture of anger and hurt. She's just very traditional about protecting the family, he said, trying to soothe me. But it wasn't soothing. It was terrifying. The next morning, I was in Mr. Croft's office. I need to ensure Eleanora's legacy is absolutely secure, I told him, my voice steadier now, fueled by a cold resolve. Ironclad. Mr. Croft, with his calm demeanor and deep understanding of Eleanora's wishes, was already several steps ahead. Eleanora anticipated the need for robust protection. Serafina, he assured me. The properties are held in a discretionary trust with you as the sole, unalienable beneficiary. But we can certainly reinforce the battlements, so to speak. We spent the next few days reviewing and strengthening every conceivable legal safeguard, ensuring the trust was impervious to marital claims or external pressures. I felt like I was fortifying Eleanora's garden against an approaching storm. The atmosphere at home grew heavier. Isabel's visits, though less frequent, were now imbued with a subtle, watchful quality. Julian, caught between his loyalty to me and his ingrained deference to his mother, grew quiet and defensive. You're making too much of this, Serafina, he'd say when I tried to discuss my unease. She's my mother. She just wants us to be secure. I began to sleep fitfully, the joy of our new marriage shadowed by this creeping dread. Had I married not just Julian, but an entire system of financial expectation and control? I loved him deeply, but Eleanora's warnings about guarding my independence felt more urgent than ever. Julian was due to attend a week-long food expo in another city. As he kissed me goodbye that Monday morning, a small, anxious knot tightened in my chest. Try to spend some time with Mother while I'm gone, he suggested. Maybe smooth things over. I nodded vaguely, relieved at the prospect of a few days' reprieve. My plan was simple. Immerse myself in my work at the gallery, perhaps visit the hillside villa to check on some planned garden maintenance, and breathe. That peace lasted less than 48 hours. Wednesday afternoon, the doorbell chimed. Through the peephole, I saw Isabel, and beside her, a man I didn't recognize, holding a smart leather briefcase. My blood ran cold. Serafina, darling, Isabel trilled as I opened the door, her smile a little too bright. So sorry to drop by unannounced. This is Mr. Hollis, a family associate. May we come in? She swept past me before I could answer, Mr. Hollis following with a hesitant air. I was just about to step out. Actually, I said, my mind racing. Perhaps another time? Oh, this won't take but a moment, Isabel assured me, settling onto Eleanora's sofa as if she owned it. She was dressed in a sharp, navy power suit, a stark contrast to the cozy chintz of the apartment. It's a simple family matter, really. Mr. Hollis opened his briefcase, extracting a sheaf of documents. What is this, Isabel? I asked, remaining standing, my arms crossed. Her expression shifted to one of solicitous concern. It's about securing our family's future, Serafina. As you know, the Thorns have always believed in prudent financial stewardship. These are just standard documents to bring your inherited properties under the umbrella of the Thorn Family Trust. The audacity of it stole my breath. My properties? We became aware, she continued smoothly, that dear Eleanora was rather more successful in her investments than anyone realized. 3 properties, is it? Quite a portfolio for a librarian to amass. The faintest sneer on librarian ignited a spark of anger within me, but I kept my voice even. And this concerns the Thorn Family Trust, how? Well, as Julian's wife, you're part of the family now, dear. And it's vital that all significant family assets are managed cohesively. For tax efficiency, for protection, for generations to come. Mr. Hollis slid the documents onto the coffee table. Just a few signatures required, here and here. I picked up the top page. The dense legal jargon swam before my eyes, but the intent was brutally clear. I would be signing over control of Eleanora's legacy to a trust managed by Victor and Isabel Thorne. Did Julian authorize this? I asked, my gaze fixed on Isabel. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. Julian understands his family obligations. He trusts us to handle these more complex financial arrangements. Meaning, no. These properties are already in a trust, I stated, my voice like ice. Eleanora established it. Isabel's smile tightened. A personal trust, however well-intentioned, lacks the scope and expertise of our family's financial team. We manage a significant portfolio. We can optimize returns, Serafina, in ways your grandmother's solicitor, however competent for small matters, simply couldn't. Just then, my phone, lying on the side table, lit up with Julian's picture. Saved by the bell, literally. I snatched it up. Julian? Is everything all right? Fine, fine. His voice came through, a little crackly. Just checking in. Mother mentioned she might pop by with some fabric swatches for the guest room curtains. I looked at Isabel, who was now examining a small porcelain bird on Eleanora's bookshelf with feigned interest. Your mother is here, I said, my voice dangerously calm as I put the phone on speaker. Along with a Mr. Hollis, who I believe is a notary. They've brought documents for me to sign, Serafina, to transfer my grandmother's properties into the Thorne family trust. Silence on the line. Then, what properties? What are you talking about, Mother? Isabel rushed over. Julian, darling, it's just a routine family financial consolidation. Serafina's grandmother, bless her, left quite a substantial inheritance. 3 properties. We were just discussing the benefits of professional management. 3. Julian sounded utterly bewildered. Serafina, what's going on? I took a deep breath. Eleanora left me this apartment, the Old Town loft, and the hillside villa, Julian. They're in a trust she set up for me. They are premarital assets. And you never told me? The hurt in his voice was a sharp pang in my chest. We can discuss that later, Julian, I said, trying to keep the immediate crisis in focus. Right now, I need to know. Did you know your mother was planning to ambush me with a notary and legal documents while you were out of town? Another pause, longer this time. Mother, Julian's voice was strained. What are you doing? Don't do anything. I'm coming home. Tomorrow. He hung up. Isabel's composure shattered. You've made this incredibly awkward, she hissed, her eyes glinting. Julian is young. He doesn't always grasp what's necessary for the family's long-term prosperity. Your secrecy about these assets is deeply concerning. My financial independence is my own, Isabel. Eleanora taught me to guard it. She stood, snatching her handbag. You would be wise to reconsider, Serafina. The Thornes have a certain way of doing things. Refusing to align with family interests can have consequences. Are you threatening me? I asked, incredulous. I am merely stating a fact of family life, she said, pulling her jacket straight. Harmony requires unity. Julian was raised with certain expectations. As Mr. Hollis hastily repacked his briefcase, Isabel delivered her parting shot from the doorway. Think it over. Mr. Hollis can return tomorrow. It would be a tragedy to allow mere property to disrupt a promising marriage. The moment the door closed, I sank onto the sofa, trembling. Then, anger surged. I called Mr. Croft, recounting the entire sordid affair. He was calmly furious and reassured me of my legal standing. Next, I contacted the property managers for the loft and villa, adding further layers of security to any access or changes. Pacing Eleanora's small living room, I felt a maelstrom of emotions, vindication for my caution, fury at Isabel's audacity, and a profound sadness for the shadow this cast over my marriage. Julian arrived the next afternoon, looking haggard. "You should have told me about the other properties," were his first words, his voice flat with exhaustion and reproach. "Yes," I admitted quietly. "Perhaps I should have. But does that justify what your mother did?" He collapsed onto the sofa. "Mother says she was just trying to protect our future, that the family trust offers advantages." "Did she mention that it would give her and your father control over assets Eleanora left solely to me? Did she tell you she hired someone to investigate my grandmother's will?" Julian raked his hands through his hair. "She's always been intense about family finances. When Camilla married Daniel, Mother insisted they pool their assets into the trust." "And did they?" He looked away. "Eventually. After Father offered Daniel a more senior role at Thorne and Sons, with a compensation package that was persuasive. The implication hung heavy in the air. So, your family uses financial leverage as a tool of control? It's not control, Serafina, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. It's ensuring the family stays strong. We talked for hours, circling the same points. His hurt at my secrecy, my outrage at Isabel's aggression. The chasm between us felt vast. The following morning, Isabel called Julian. I heard his side of it, a series of pained, defensive responses. "Mother, we need time." "No, I don't think involving Father more directly is helpful right now." "Yes, I understand the importance of family unity." He hung up, looking utterly defeated. She's not going to let this go. And she didn't. First, Camilla arrived, bearing a lemon drizzle cake and an expression of sisterly concern. "I just wanted to see how you both are," she said, her eyes, so like Isabel's, taking in every detail of our apartment. Her attempt at mediation consisted of a long monologue about how she and Daniel had initially resisted the family trust, but had come to see its wisdom. "It's just easier, Serafina," she'd concluded. "Fighting Mother on these things, it's a losing battle." Then came a call from Victor, inviting Julian for a father-son chat, which, Julian later recounted, was a thinly veiled lecture on loyalty and responsibility, culminating in the news that his role at Thorne and Sons was being restructured. A euphemism we both knew for a demotion or a pay cut if he didn't toe the family line regarding my inheritance. The pressure was immense. We were barely speaking. We slept in separate rooms, the silence in Eleanora's little apartment deafening. Julian started working later, a faint scent of whiskey clinging to him when he finally came home. One evening, staring bleakly at our untouched dinners, Julian finally broke. "This isn't the first time, he said, his voice barely a whisper. "My Aunt Lydia, Father's younger sister, she inherited a collection of rare botanical illustrations from our great-grandmother. Mother insisted they belonged in the family archives, under her curation, of course." "What happened?" I asked, my heart aching for the man I loved, trapped in this web. Julian swirled the wine in his glass. "Aunt Lydia refused. She loved those illustrations. Shortly after, her husband, an architect, found all his local council tenders drying up. Projects he was favored for suddenly went to other firms with closer ties to influential families. They struggled. Eventually, they moved to another state. We barely see them. Isabel deliberately undermined their livelihood? I was horrified. Mother would say she merely supported businesses aligned with family interests, Julian said, a flicker of his old irony in his tone. But yes, that's what happened. And you've lived with this, knowing this? He finally met my gaze, his eyes filled with a pain that mirrored my own. No, Serafina. I haven't really lived with it. I've just existed alongside it. It was always easier to acquiesce. Until you. That conversation, raw and painful as it was, became a fragile bridge across the chasm. The next day, I suggested we see a marriage counselor. Julian agreed without hesitation. In the calm, neutral space of the therapist's office, the layers began to peel back. Julian spoke of a childhood spent navigating Isabel's expectations, of Victor's passive compliance to keep the peace, of the subtle ways financial leverage was used to ensure conformity. "I don't want that for us," he said, his voice thick with emotion during our third session. I watched my parents' marriage become a series of negotiations and capitulations. I swore mine would be different. "What do you want, Julian?" the therapist asked gently. He turned to me, his eyes clear and resolved for the first time in weeks. "I want a partnership, Serafina. A real one. Built on trust and respect, not on balance sheets or family directives. Even if that means challenging my mother. Even if it means walking away from Thorne and Sons." That night, back in Eleanora's apartment, a sense of peace settled between us. "I need to show you," I said, opening my laptop. I laid it all out. The trust documents Mr. Croft had prepared, the rental statements, Eleanora's careful notes. "This is what she left me. This is what your mother tried to take." Julian studied everything in silence. When he finally looked up, his expression was soft. "Why didn't you tell me sooner, Serafina?" At first, it was caution, born of past hurts. Then, after meeting Isabel, it became a kind of fear. "I saw how money was used in your family, and I wanted to keep Eleanora's gift separate, sacrosanct. And now?" I closed the laptop and took his hands. "Now, I want us to be a team. To face this together." The following day, Julian called Isabel and asked her to come over. Alone. "It's time we drew some lines in the sand," he told me, his jaw set with a new determination. Isabel arrived, punctual as ever, her Chanel suit a silent statement of her status. Her smile wavered when Julian, not I, opened the door. "Julian, darling. I'm so glad you called. I've been so worried." "Come in, Mother," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Serafina and I need to talk with you." We sat her on the sofa, Julian and I in two armchairs facing her, a deliberate formation. "I trust this means you've both seen sense regarding the family trust," she began. "Actually, Mother," Julian said, "we've made some decisions. Firstly, Serafina's inheritance will remain entirely hers in her own trust, as her grandmother intended." Isabel's lips thinned. "Julian, you don't understand the complexities." "Secondly," he pressed on, "we will be making our own financial decisions as a couple. Our marriage is a partnership, not an extension of Thorne and Sons." Isabel turned to me, her voice sharp. "You've poisoned him against his own family." "Mother," Julian's voice was stern now. "This isn't about Serafina. This is about your behavior. You investigated my wife. You ambushed her with a notary. That is not acceptable." The mask of civility finally slipped. "Those properties," she exclaimed. "They should be bolstering the family. Do you have any idea how the hillside villa alone could be leveraged for the new export initiative Victor is planning?" There it was. The real agenda. "You didn't just investigate, you appraised," I said softly. "You knew their potential value to the business. Thorne and Sons has provided for this family for generations." Isabel retorted. "When an opportunity arises to strengthen it, we seize it." Julian leaned forward. "Is the business struggling, Mother? Is that why you're so desperate? Is Father gambling again?" The way Isabel's carefully powdered face seemed to crumple told us everything. "It's not gambling," she stammered. "Victor simply made some ill-advised investments in the commodities market. There are temporary cash flow issues." "How much?" Julian asked, his voice weary. "Nearly $500,000, she whispered, the fight draining out of her. The banks are hesitant to extend further credit without more collateral." The pieces clicked into place. My properties weren't just a desirable addition to the Thorne portfolio, they were a potential lifeline. "Why didn't you just ask for help, Isabel?" I asked, my anger giving way to a strange pity. "Instead of this manipulation?" "Thorns don't ask for help," she said, her voice stiff with pride. "We solve our own problems." "Well, this way isn't working," Julian said gently. He reached for my hand. "Mother, Serafina and I are willing to help. But on our terms." Isabel stared at us, speechless. You would help? Under strict conditions, I clarified. Victor must get professional help for his gambling. Immediately. And, Julian added, I'm resigning from Thorne and Sons. I've been offered a lead role at Seabreeze Innovates, an ecotech startup. I'm taking it. Isabel looked horrified. You can't leave now. The business needs you. The business needs unbiased, professional management, mother, not just family members. And I need to build something of my own. We laid out our offer. We would allow the old town loft, not the villa, and certainly not Eleanora's apartment, to be used as collateral for a structured business loan, contingent on Victor entering a treatment program and agreeing to bring in an independent financial controller for Thorne and Sons. And one more thing, Julian said, his eyes meeting his mother's. You owe Serafina an apology. A sincere one. For a long moment, Isabel sat in stunned silence. Then, to my utter astonishment, her composure cracked entirely. Tears, real and unglamorous, streamed down her face. It's all falling apart, she sobbed. Victor promises he'll stop, but he never does. Camilla and Daniel are talking about moving away. I was just trying to hold it all together. In that moment, the formidable Isabel Thorne looked small and afraid. It didn't excuse her actions, but it allowed a sliver of understanding. We're offering a way forward, Isabel, I said, handing her a tissue. A collaboration, not a takeover. The weeks that followed were a period of careful reconstruction. Victor, faced with the stark reality of his situation, agreed to treatment. Isabel, slowly and painfully, began to cede control. Julian blossomed in his new role at Seabreeze Innovates, his passion for sustainable technology reignited. I received a promotion at the gallery, entrusted with curating a major exhibition of emerging Port Blossom artists. The Old Town Loft was duly leveraged, under an agreement meticulously drafted by Mr. Croft, protecting my ultimate ownership. 3 months later, Isabel invited us for dinner. There was a new quietness in the Thorne home. Victor, though still clearly navigating his recovery, seemed more present. Over dessert, Isabel reached into her handbag and pulled out a small, beautifully wrapped package and an envelope. Serafina, she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. The envelope contains a formal, and I hope, adequate, apology. She then pushed the package towards me. This was my own grandmother's. A little cottage in the wine country, very simple. She always said it should go to someone who would cherish its peace. I'd like you and Julian to have it. As your own. No strings. It was an olive branch, offered with a humility I hadn't thought her capable of. A year after that tumultuous period, Julian and I sat on the porch of that little vineyard cottage, watching the sunset paint the rolling hills gold and amethyst. Eleanora would be so proud of you, Julian said, his arm around me. I think she'd be proud of us both, I replied, leaning into his warmth. We learned to cultivate our own garden together. The journey had been arduous, but the lessons profound. Financial independence, I realized, wasn't about hoarding resources, but about having the autonomy to make choices aligned with one's values. Healthy boundaries, clearly and kindly articulated, didn't sever relationships but allowed them to breathe and grow in healthier soil. And true partnership, like a well-tended garden, required constant nurturing, honesty, and the courage to prune away what no longer served. Julian then turned to me, his eyes shining. Seabreeze just landed a massive grant for ocean plastics reclamation. They want me to lead the project. His joy was infectious. That's wonderful, Julian. I hugged him. And I have some news too, I said, my own heart fluttering. I saw Dr. Chin this morning. We're going to have a baby. The pure, unadulterated happiness on Julian's face was a reflection of my own. As we talked late into the evening, about names and nursery colors, we also spoke of legacies. We decided to establish a small foundation in Eleanora's name, Eleanora's Grove, dedicated to supporting young female artists and artisans in Port Blossom, helping them cultivate their own gardens of independence. Looking back, Isabel's desperate attempt to secure my inheritance, though born of fear and misguided tradition, had inadvertently become the catalyst for profound healing and growth, not just for Julian and me, but for the entire Thorne family. Eleanora's legacy, those 3 properties, had been more than just bricks and mortar. They had been the seeds of change. And as we prepared to welcome new life, I knew the most valuable inheritance we could pass on would be the wisdom of tending to one's own garden, with courage, with love, and with an unwavering respect for the quiet strength that blossoms from true independence. The gentle echo of Eleanora's voice was, and always would be, my truest guide.